Okay, we are live on YouTube. You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Kevin. So with that said, I wanted to introduce everyone to Jim Harbin, who is a Deputy Commissioner here in the Department of Planning and Development and oversees the Planning Bureau for the city. Jim, you want to go ahead and kick us off? Jim? I'm not sure if you can hear us. You're on mute.
Sorry about that, guys. I was on mute. Thanks again, Sophia. And welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. And welcome to the 2020 second round of the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund Grant Program. As Sophia said, and I know many of you on the call, but for those who don't know who I am, my name is Jim Harbin, Deputy Commissioner with the Department of Planning and Development and manager of the NOF program. Today, we're going to provide NOF information session that is designed to support our open application period and provide details on how to successfully navigate and participate in the program. We have quite a bit of information to share with you today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to start by introducing you to the rest of our team, particularly starting with our collaborators over at Summer Corps. So Ruben, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself? Ruben, you must be on mute.
Sorry, that mute button. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Jim, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to see you all here. Thanks again for your participation in the program. My name is Ruben Wadi, and I am with Summer Corps. We are the main program administrator for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, and I look forward to working with you all potentially in the future. Thank you.
Sophia, you want to go ahead and reintroduce yourself and your role in the program?
Sure. So again, my name is Sophia Carey. I am a projects administrator here at DBD. I've worked with the city for over a decade. I was also in a previous life a supervisor over at the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. So looking forward to working with the potential applicants the way we do with the grantees for the NOF program moving forward.
Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started with the program. And I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you, Mary, and you can go ahead and start off by introducing yourself. And you may be on mute as well, Mary.
We're all doing it, sorry. Yeah. Hi, my name is Mary Kuhn. Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm an economic development coordinator at DPD working on the NOF program. Happy to be here today. So I want to get started, Sophie, if you don't mind moving to the next slide, with a vision that we have for the program. So our vision is strong and vibrant commercial corridors on the south, southwest, and the west sides of Chicago. And we want to bring that investment to these neighborhoods that have historically not had investment. And that's our vision for the program. So I ask you to keep that picture in your head as we go through the slides today. Okay, so what are we going to cover today? So we'll just talk about the basics of what is NOF. Eligibility is very, very important. So who's eligible? Where do you have to be located to be eligible? What expenses are eligible? We'll go through all that. We'll talk about the application process. We've moved it online, so it's a little bit different than it was in past years. We'll talk about the selection process, what type of projects that we're looking for. It is a publicly funded program, so there are some requirements and restrictions around it. We'll talk about those. And then lastly, the payment process. Once folks are selected for the program, how does that work? Okay, so we'll start with our funding and how we're able to do this program. The funding comes from something called the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus. It's NOB and we are NOF, so it can be a little bit confusing, but that's the source of our funding. So developers pay into a special fee when they are building projects downtown. And NOF receives 80% of those funds, and then the other 20% are split between landmarks and the local impact fund, but it is not through local property taxes like many other programs. Next slide, please. Okay, I think my screen may have froze. Are you there, Sophia? Okay.
Yeah, I am.
So next, okay, great. The NOF program started in 2017. It was launched as a financial tool to bring investment into the neighborhoods from downtown. 2019, we had a change in administration, makeover of the program. We re-engaged the community. A lot of we think positive changes to the program. It was already a great program, but we got feedback from the community and made some changes. And then in 2020, we are on our second round. We had a round earlier in the year, announced those finalists, and now we're happy to say that we are doing a second round. We also participated in the Together Now Fund to help property owners who experienced damage this summer. And so September we'll be launching the new application, and hopefully we can help you get ready for that application today. So what will this look like? Right, almost 50 million, about 49 million committed in grant funds. It's a very competitive program. So received for full applications last time. We have a screener that we'll talk about in a little bit, but the folks that made it through the pre-screener and went ahead and completed the full application, we had 325 of those applications for our first round this year, and we were able to select 32 out of that 325 to receive just over 5 million in funding. So what are the goals of the program? We talked about this a little bit earlier with the vision. So we want to attract cultural and commercial amenities to these neighborhoods to improve the quality of life. You all know well that the private investment has not been in there, has not happened in many of these neighborhoods, which can contribute to inequality and poverty. So that's the goal of our program, is to help stimulate economic development in these areas. And we want to build community wealth with these local entrepreneurs that want to open businesses in the community, or are already running businesses and want to expand. We're here to provide those resources. Some of them financial, and we have other resources too with technical assistance that we're providing to entrepreneurs. So how do we do this? It's very, very important that we work closely with the community. So we work with our local government officials, we work with local community organizations, and of course, small business owners to see what the needs are in each community. Every community is different. We are able to get the word out through all these community partners, and we will be asking for your help with that too, to spread the word that we have a new round coming. We're looking for projects that align with the community's needs and align with the plans that have been written for those communities. And then we also rely on our community partners to assist people with their applications. Next slide, please. Okay, so eligibility. Who is eligible for the program? So we talked about commercial and cultural amenities. So the activity that is happening in the space really needs to be like a cultural or a commercial activity. So nonprofits are eligible for the program, but there has to be a commercial activity that that is open to the public. So for example, it might be a nonprofit organization that wants to open up a cafe. So that would be eligible because it is a commercial activity. So on the flip side, some activities or things that would not be eligible would be home-based businesses or live workspaces. So NOF does not pay for residential work. manufacturing or industrial businesses, unfortunately, are not included in the grant. Social services, like daycare centers, senior care, workforce development, those would not be included. And churches and places of worship, if it's a place of worship, if that's the sole activity, we do have some churches that decide to open up cafes and are doing a commercial activity in the community, and that could be eligible. But if it's just money to fix up your church, that won't be eligible by itself. Next slide, please. So let's look at some grantees. You can kind of see the array of different businesses that are part of our program that we're very proud of. Grocery stores are really important in the community, so we always like to see applications from, fresh food, grocery stores, delis, that type of thing. And we do have some of those in our program. Dental office, we have an art gallery, 345, sip and savor, coffee shops. People always like to have those in their communities. And then bars and restaurants are also part of our program. So just to give you a taste of some of the projects that we have in NOF, but retail and commercial should be the takeaway. Okay, so let's talk about the different types of projects. So we have two different tracks in NOF. We have the small grants track and the large grants track. So small grants are $250,000 or less, and large grants are $250,000 or greater. This presentation is just about, we're going to focus on small grants. So we're not covering large in this presentation. So for small, it's very competitive. We talked about that. And then we also expect grantees to finish their projects within 2 years. Large grants, they're much bigger projects. They go through city council and they have more requirements that they have to follow. So what type of projects are we looking at? Businesses that want to expand, new locations. So could be a startup business. Those we have some new construction that is part of vacant properties activated. And then lastly, but the grant funds cannot be used just for acquisition. There always has to be some renovation or some construction that is the major portion of the project. But the acquisition can be used towards the, they can be part of the project cost. We could talk a little bit more in detail about that. Next slide, please.
We didn't lose Mary, did we, Sophia? Are we okay?
I'm here. Sorry about that. I think my internet is not cooperating. Okay, so what can NOF pay for? Expenses that are allowed. So we do allow minor site improvements. You can see that's on, it's on both sides of the chart there. We do pay, but it needs to be part of a larger project. The building acquisition can be part of the cost, but it can't be solely building acquisition. We do pay for security. A lot of our folks, a lot of the building stock is older. So a lot of times the buildings, they need HVAC, they might need repairs to the roof, facade, that type of thing. We also pay for soft costs, so the architectural engineering fees. So we pay for most things that are associated with a renovation project. What we can't pay for is anything that is residential. If it's a mixed use project, the residential part will not be covered. We will cover the commercial part. If you have a violation, we can't pay for the repairs to bring it up to code. We can't pay for operating, unfortunately, like travel, lodging, that type of thing. And the minor repairs can be paid for, but if they're part of a larger project, but the project would probably not be selected if it's only, painting that someone is looking to do with their business. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about eligible expenses. Let's talk about eligible area now. So we have something that we call the Qualified Investment Area, or QIA. And this is the area that NOF covers. And we selected this area using US Census data, looking at vacancy rates, number of people below the poverty line, percentage of people unemployed, all these different factors that we saw as the places that needed the investment the most. So this is what we call the QIA. So that's kind of the basis of the first block of our eligibility. Next slide, please. Okay, and then the second piece of the eligibility are the corridors. So we have 3 different type of corridors. And this is all on our website, so we'll walk through how you can check that. But we have eligible corridors, priority corridors, and the Invest Southwest corridors, and those are the newer corridors that we're working with. And out of those 3, the Invest Southwest corridors are going to get the most weight in our selection process. So in order to be eligible for NOF, we talked about the QIA, so you have to be within the QIA, and then additionally you have to be on one of these corridors. And the purpose of this is that we want the investment to be focused and to have more impact. So it's focused on these specific corridors. And then the URL is right there, chicago.gov/NOF. So you can go visit our website, and then we're going to walk through how to check the eligibility. So go on our website and you'll see the map there that has the yellow areas. Those yellow areas are the QIA. That's the Qualified Investment Area. So you can click search to see if the property qualifies. Okay, and you'll enter your address there. You do need an address to apply for NOF. And we're going to talk about site control later on in the presentation, but you do need a specific address in order to apply. Next slide, please. Okay, so address here is 4945 West Division Street. And just triple check that address to make sure it's correct. And this is an eligible address. So the website will let you know if it's eligible for NOF or not, and if you can proceed. Okay, and then I think at this point, I will hand the presentation over to my colleague, Ruben Wadi.
Thank you very much, Mary. All right, thanks again, everybody, for being here. So what I want to go over now is what exactly is the Project Readiness Assessment. As you all might know, we are having a round 2 2024 NOF applications opening up this Monday, September 14th. As a part of that application, we have what's called a Project Readiness Assessment that assesses some basic eligibility criteria to indicate whether or not you meet some eligibility requirements for the program. So it's just really a series of easy multiple choice questions to see if sufficient project planning has been completed or at the very least thought about. This is designed to save time for applicants that might not be ready exactly for the NOF program and directs them to the appropriate resources so that they might become ready for future application rounds. But if you are an applicant that demonstrates the appropriate readiness for the program, you're provided with what we call a unique application code, which is needed to apply for the program. So essentially, you go through the Project Readiness Assessment. If you meet the basic eligibility criteria, you receive a code, and then you use that code to apply for the program. You'll be prompted to do so if you do pass the Project Readiness Assessment. Next slide, please. So like I said, if the basic eligibility requirements are not met, there are resources that are made available to all applicants so that they can bolster their application. And just in general, even if you do meet the eligibility criteria, you might need some additional assistance in filling out the rest of the application. not to worry, we do have a list of community partners that could potentially help out. They can provide assistance for applicants, whether or not you're at a certain readiness level. And we have selected these community partners based off the experiences that not only have we had with them, but applicants have had with them in the past. We've had quite a few applicants that did not have an appropriate project readiness at the time that they applied, and then they went to a community partner, and then they were able to reapply, and they were able to meet the basic eligibility requirements and successfully complete their application. And again, this is on our website, so you'll be able to see that list of community partners as well as other resources to help with strategic pain points to help you out with your application. Next slide, please. So how to apply. So once you've completed the readiness assessment and you have that application code, you're essentially good to go from there. So at the prompt, you click continue on the application code window to be directed to the application. This is important because we did have a few instances last year where somebody completed the readiness assessment, but they didn't fulfill the application, but they thought that they did because they were made eligible through the project readiness assessment. So in order to nip that in the bud, I do want to say, if you are given a code, you must click continue to go on to the rest of the application. If you don't do this, your application won't be submitted, and therefore your entry will not be recognized as something that we can actually vet for finalist selection. So again, this is step one, is very crucial. If you get the code, you must click continue to go on to apply for the application, or to apply for the grant. And you create an account on submittable.com. So if you're prompted to do this, you know that you're that you're going on the right path. And then you begin the application. And if you're not ready to answer all the questions, or if you don't have all the documentation right there, you can actually conveniently save your progress at that time and come back at a later time, as long as it's within the timeline for actually submitting the application, which will be Friday, November 6, 2020. So again, you can save your application and come back on a later date, as long as it is before or on the deadline. But anytime after that, any application that is incomplete will not be counted as an actual submission for the program. And of course, make sure to upload all relevant supplemental files for the program. So that's going to include potentially photos of the location, construction estimates that you might have acquired through bid letting, design drawings and construction schedules, proof of site control, documentation proving that you have funding for the project in part or in full, or whatever else you think might add to the strength of your application. Could be a business plan or a strategic plan, what have you. Whatever it is that you think might be relevant, go ahead and upload that documentation. And finally, before you click that, you click the apply button, before you click the submit button, double check and triple check to make sure that everything you have is accurate and represents your project in full. Next slide, please. So this is how we select grantees. So as Mary indicated earlier, the NOF is a very competitive program. We receive hundreds of applications every round, and we only make a few finalist selections. So competitiveness is the #1 thing I want you all to keep in mind as you submit your application. It is very competitive, and there is limited funding, which means that we can only select so many. We get a number of great applications, but we do have to make selections in accordance with how much funding we have for the program. So I do want to emphasize that it's a very, very competitive process. With that said, there are ways to make your application as strong as possible for the review committee. The project readiness element that I mentioned earlier, what this is really referring to is how quickly can the applicant start the project, and how many resources do they have available for the project to commence? For instance, do they have site control? Is there proper financing in place, and other basic things? But site control is a really important element here, because if you do have site control, whether it's a deed or a lease, or site control is imminent through a purchase and sale agreement, This indicates that you have not only control of the property, but an understanding of the needs of the property. Maybe you actually brought along a contractor to do an assessment of the property before you signed a lease, or you made that a part of the deed. So site control really is a crucial indicator there of project readiness. Financial feasibility, we looked at whether or not there are finances in place for the project, either in the now or in the future. Have you identified a funding source? Do you have a lender? Do you have investors? Is there a strategy? Here? Maybe you'll be crowdfunding. We would just like to know a lot about your financial feasibility because that's a crucial indicator about when the project can start and when it will be funded. The construction plan. So have you thought about the construction timeline? Have you thought about the payment schedule to the contractor? Or are those things that you have thought about just a little bit, but need a little bit of assistance on? Wherever you are in the construction planning phase, it's important to at least list out some of the things that you've been thinking about to give us an understanding that you know when this construction will be complete and when the business will either be open or reopen, or when you will be ready to move in a potential tenant if you are a landlord. And finally, we look at catalytic impact. So that's one of the crucial indicators here for the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund. We want to build vibrant commercial corridors in Chicago's neediest neighborhoods and corridors on the south, southwest, and west sides of Chicago. We want to make sure that each project contributes to the economic vitality of the region and as well as the aesthetic quality of the region so that we can spur economic development in the now and in the future. So those are the 4 key elements that we look at for selection. Next slide, please. So along with the base grant, we also have what's called the Building Community Wealth Bonus, or BCWB for short. So these are bonuses that add additional grant value to the maximum grant for if you can meet 2 conditions, or if depending on what you apply for, you might be able to get access to either of them or both of them. So first is local residency. This is an incentive meant to entice local owners, local business owners, local property owners to apply for the program to keep the wealth that they generate from the project within their community. So the local residency bonus is if you are a for-profit business. This is something that's unfortunately not available to nonprofits, but it is for for-profit businesses that have 50% or more ownership stake holders, and they are people of color. So essentially, if 50% or more of your owners are people of color, you may be able to apply for the local residency bonus if you have an address that falls within the qualified investment area, whose map we went over earlier with Mary. So if you qualify, or if your business qualifies for the local residency bonus, you can receive a potential 25% bonus on top of your grant, bringing it from 50% to 75%. Again, it's contingent on whether or not you actually live, or more than half of your business owners live in the qualified investment area. Then we have the local hiring bonus. This is something that's paid out after the project is complete. And I want to make that distinction right up front. This is for hiring people within the community, and their addresses fall within the qualified investment area, much like the local residency bonus. So after the project is complete and you would like to qualify for the local hiring bonus, we could pay you up to 25% of your total project costs in the form of wage expenses for hires that you make after the project is complete. So again, local hiring is paid out after the project is complete, and when you are able to demonstrate that you have hired people from within the community and their addresses fall within the qualified investment area. So again, local residency is paid throughout the life of the project if you can demonstrate that 50% or more of your owners are people of color, and that, 50% or more of your owners, I made a mistake there, 50% or more of your owners live within the qualified investment area. That is the distinction there. That's paid out during the life of the project. And then for the local hiring bonus, that's paid out after the project is complete. Next slide, please. So how much do grantees receive? So let's go over what the funding mechanism here is. So let's look at a total project cost of 100%. And for ease of calculations, let's assume that a total project is actually $100,000. So for your base grant, which includes your eligible costs for rehab, whether that's going to be rehabilitation or new construction as well, it's going to be 50% of eligible project costs. So right off the bat, if we have a $100,000 total project cost, your base grant will be $50,000. So let's say that you also qualify for the local residency bonus. And again, the criteria for that is if you have 50% or more of your owners living within a qualified investment area. That's the criteria there. If you're able to demonstrate that, then we can add an additional 25% to the grant total, bringing the base grant from 50% or $50,000 to 75% or $75,000. So in this instance, if you're not going to be doing the local hiring bonus, that means that there is a contribution that the grantee has to make. And so we take $100,000 minus $75,000. And then that means your portion of the project costs are going to be 25% or $25,000. Now, let's say that you are looking to do the local hiring bonus on top of the local residency bonus. So again, this happens after the project is complete, hence why it is positioned the way it is on the graph on the page. The local hiring bonus is paid out after the project is complete, up to 25% of total project costs. And in this case, that would be $25,000. So once the project is complete and everything has been issued, the business license, the permits have been signed off on, the local hiring bonus kicks in and that gets paid out up to $25,000. So if you're looking to do both the local residency bonus and the local hiring bonus, that brings your total grant amount to $100,000. If you're looking to do either or bonus, that's $75,000. And if you're looking to just do the base grant, that is $50,000. And regardless of the total project costs, the maximum grant amount for small grants is $250,000. So the soft cap is going to be your base grant percentage, which is either 50, 75, or 100%. And then the hard cap is $250,000. So that's the maximum that you can receive for any project. Next slide, please. So what to expect as a grantee. So there's essentially 3 cycles to the grant process. The first cycle is the finalist cycle, which takes about 3 to 6 months to clear. So essentially, this is where you're submitting basic documentation to verify certain additional requirements for the program. So site control, and then ownership interests, economic disclosure statements, debt owed to the city, and things of that nature. This is a crucial step in the process because we have to make sure that everything is within everything is legally sound with the project. So we're just going to have you essentially fill out some basic legal documentation. And then as well, after the legal documentation, we're going to be having you finalize the project scope for the rehab, for the new construction, the acquisition, whatever goes into it. We're going to be having you do a bid letting process so that you can eventually become a grantee, which is a 12 to 18 month cycle. So for the grantee, so for this portion of the project, this is where you'll actually be completing the project. So you'll be doing the construction, or the contract will be performing the construction. You'll be pulling the permits, performing the construction, and then eventually, if you need, getting business licenses to be in operation and things of that matter. So this is the lengthiest part of the process, but it is the most important step. This is where you'll be managing the project, and of course, we'll all be on hand to assist. But yeah, you'll be managing the project here and essentially getting it done to eventually become an alumni after you complete the project and after you receive your local hiring bonus as well, if you do qualify for the local hiring. So for the alumni, it's basically we're going to ask everybody to sign a covenant, whether you're a business owner or a property owner or both, a covenant that stipulates that you're going to remain the owner of the property, or you're going to remain the business entity at the property for 3 years after you receive your grant amount. And here we're going to be asking you to complete an annual survey to make sure that you're in business and to see if there's any strategic pain points with your business to see if we can further assist you after the project. Next slide, please. So how are grants paid? There's a few ways that we can do it, and in particular, there's a few stages. So if you're in the finalist stage, you can indeed receive some grant money, but not for hard costs, not for the construction. In the previous slide, there was mention of a conditional award letter that's issued to a grantee, to a finalist so that they can become a grantee. This conditional award letter is the green light for you to actually perform some of the hard costs. You actually cannot incur any hard costs before receiving that conditional award letter. And if that happens, unfortunately, all those costs will be null and void for the grant. However, we do understand the importance of pre-development and pre-construction costs. These include architectural and engineering expenses and permit fees as well. So we can actually pay out for pre-development expenses that were incurred within 6 months of you being selected for the program. So we can't go all the way back in time, like 2 years ago, for pre-development costs, but if it's within a reasonable range of you being selected as a finalist for the program, we can reimburse you for those pre-development expenses. And these, again, include architectural and engineering fees. So that is how you can see grant funds in the finalist stage. As a grantee, when you're in the midst of the construction process, you can receive a rebate for payments that you make to a contractor that's in accordance with your eligible grant amount. Or if you have deposited money into the construction escrow and the contractor has made proper progress on the project and it's all in accordance with the permit, we can then pay the contractor through the construction escrow. So as a rebate, that's when you, the grantee, would be seeing money come into your hand. But if you're doing this through construction escrow, you personally don't see the funds. The funds actually go directly to the contractors performing work on the project. But either way, that's what we're looking at in terms of reimbursement to the grantee. And then finally, as an alumni, after the project is complete and everything is in compliance, we can then reimburse you for local hiring expenses, the eligible workforce costs. And again, the criteria for that are making hires within the community, within the qualified investment areas, the map that we showcased earlier. So you can receive money as a finalist through pre-development costs. You can receive credit for the grant or reimbursement of the grant in the grantee stage throughout the life of the project. And then finally, as an alumni, for making local hiring, for fulfilling the local hiring requirements if you did indeed apply for it. Next slide, please. So how do we support grantees through the program? There's actually a few ways that we do this. The main way, and it's also on our website, is the Technical Assistance Program. We have lending coaches, architects, and construction managers that you might contract with to help complete your project. You can mix and match these as you need. So if you need lending help and architectural help, you can look into our pool of technical assistance providers and receive assistance from both those types. If you just need help with construction management, you can just choose construction management. It depends on what the pain points are for the project and how you'd like to address those pain points. So we do have that we do have the technical assistance program available for that. For the concierge program, we have city staff to support and answer questions regarding building permits, construction timelines, inspections, business licensing, Secretary of State registration, and things like that. And I'm also the primary administrator for the program. So if you have any questions about any of those specific parts of the program, you will be able to come, you can come to me with those as well. And I'll be able to assist. I'll be on hand throughout the life of the project, essentially. So if you have any questions about any step of the process, you can come to me with those questions as well. And then we help out with marketing as well. So city recognition for completed projects via social media marketing, grand openings, ribbon cuttings. And this is a part of the alumni program as well. We definitely want to give you recognition if you do complete your project. So we'd like to be on hand to see if you're ready for a groundbreaking or a soft opening or just a grand opening in general. These are the ways that we support grantees throughout the life of the program and even after the program. Next slide. So what are the next steps? I know that was a lot of information, so let's go ahead and go over the next steps. So the upcoming NOF application period is going to be from September 14th to November 6th, 2020. The online application is only for small grants at this time, AKA grants that are for $250,000 or less. We're not accepting applications for large grant programs at this very moment. All interested applicants must complete that project readiness assessment that we mentioned earlier, which again is going to be available on September 14th. And all applications must be submitted online. We're actually not accepting applications that are sent in via mail or handed in to me or one of the staff directly. We're only accepting online applications, and they all must be turned in on time. So I would advise you all to start planning your projects now, or thinking about your projects, or at the very least researching NOF to see if it's the correct fit for your project. And again, I'm on hand to answer questions if you have any, but now is the best time to start planning. There's plenty of time for you to apply. There's even a little bit of period before you can even submit your application. So start doing a little bit of planning and taking into account all the things that Mary and myself had mentioned earlier. And we encourage you to work with different community partners to submit strong and competitive applications. Again, this is a very competitive process. And the way to make your application strong is to work with community partners to have the best application and the best supplemental materials that you have on hand before you submit the application. The better the quality of the application, the better the quality of the supplemental materials, the more context that the reviewers will have for your project as we go through and review everything. Slide, please. And so this is our contact information. So we have the Department of Planning and Development. Myself, I'm representing Summer Corps. We have the Greater Southwest Development Corporation. But again, if you have questions for the NOF, this is for NOF small. So if you have questions, we have the general email inbox there, nof@cityofchicago.org. And then, of course, if you have other questions, you can contact me at Summer Corps. That phone number is 312-360-3300. But if you change 3300 to 3319, you can call me directly. But yeah, these are the links and the websites and the email addresses that you'll be able to utilize as you're preparing for a strong grant application. Next slide. So that said, we recognize that was a lot of information, so we'd love to open the floor for any questions that we have.
Hey, thanks, Ruben, for that. And yes, the Q&A session is open. It has been pretty active during the presentation, so thank you, everyone, for putting in your questions. There are some questions that we'd like to raise during the live presentation session, because either it is a frequently asked question or it is something that is worth more of a discussion than a quick answer via the messaging system. So one is, there have been some questions about acquisition of property. And whether that qualifies for NOF. Can you talk briefly, Ruben, about purchase of property?
Yes, and that's a great question, so thank you. The acquisition of property is indeed an eligible expense for the program, but there must be an associated rehab or new construction project to go along with the acquisition. So if you're just looking to acquire a piece of land and do nothing else with it and receive grant funds for it, that wouldn't be an eligible expense. But if you're looking to acquire, let's say acquire a single space commercial building, and you're looking to do rehab to it, maybe some mechanical rehab as well as some carpentry, we would be able to give credit for the acquisition in that case. So just to summarize, acquisition is only eligible if there is an appropriate rehab or new construction project with it. If you're just looking to use NOF for acquisition, that would not be an eligible expense.
Great, thanks. There were also several questions asking about whether the grant will cover equipment. Can you talk a little bit about that? Are there certain types of equipment that are eligible or ineligible? How is that considered as part of the project?
Yes, so we can do equipment, but there are a few things to note about it. The equipment expenses are really available for those that are looking for additional financing for the project to help get their project costs higher than the base amount if they don't qualify for a 100% grant. So this is for those that are only doing local residency or are only doing local hiring or are doing neither of them. So equipment expenses in that case, if you do qualify for it, we can reimburse it after the project is complete, and it's very specific types of equipment. So we're talking about things that are fixed into the actual fixtures of the building, the actual mechanicals of the building. So the primary example here would be thinking about a kitchen that needs stoves or upgrades to the hoods or things like that. Those are fixtures those are pieces of equipment that are fixed right into the mechanicals of the building, and we can reimburse for those after the project is complete, not before. So that's when it would be eligible. So we can do equipment like that. We can't do things like pots and pans and spoons, knives, forks, and things like that. So again, it has to be fixed equipment that's fixed into the mechanicals of the building, and this is only if you don't qualify for a 100% grant up front, and you're looking for some additional financing to help you get closer to the 100% mark, but not exactly at 100%. And again, pay it out after the project is complete.
Thanks. So Ruben, to kind of put a pin in it, what about kitchen appliances for food businesses?
Oh, you mean like pots and pans and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, what kind? So things that are fixed would be hoods, right?
Yeah.
Other types of kitchen. Are there other types of kitchen appliances in your experience that you have seen that would be eligible?
Yeah, there's been walk-in coolers. There's been refrigerators. Really big piece of equipment that would be really hard to move, and basically, if you're moving out and another restaurant is coming in, that equipment would more than likely stay. So things like that. But yeah, walk-in coolers, kitchen hoods, industrial size stoves for shared commercial kitchens, larger refrigerators, things of that nature. So those would be the eligible expenses. And there's more examples out there. Those are just the primary ones that I've seen in the past, and it's mostly for kitchens. But again, things like pots and pans wouldn't be eligible. Those are things you could easily bring into and take out of the space. So those would not be eligible.
Great, thanks, Ruben. We've received a couple of questions about large grants, which we know was not covered in the presentation. How should individuals get more information about the large grants track?
So for the large grant track, I do believe there's going to be information online about that. We're still waiting for a little bit more information, but basically you can email nof-large@cityofchicago.org if you have questions about the NOF large. Otherwise, just you can keep yourself apprised of the information by going to neighborhoodopportunityfund.com and checking that out.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's see. We've got more questions coming in.
Sophia,
Mary,
can I jump in on large?
Yeah, please do.
Just want to jump in on large. So we got light to NOF small and NOF large. We don't have any rules that say that you can apply for one and can't apply for the other. Because we know the date that NOF small is opening, September 14th, I would encourage you to apply for NOF small. And then, if you end up applying for NOF large later, that's fine. But because we have a fixed date and we have the certainty that it is opening, I would encourage you to definitely go for it with NOF small.
Cool. Great. Thanks, Mary. So while you're on, Mary and Ruben, there's been a number of questions from individuals that are asking about specific types of businesses or activities and whether they are eligible or not. So for example, things like counseling, yoga studios, e-commerce stores, computer repairs, auto junkyard. Can you provide some more information on how one can think through whether their proposed business activity would be eligible for the NOF program or not? And obviously, we can't go through every single type of business to say yes or no. So
Sure.
Is there another way that potential applicants can think about what is considered a commercial use or a cultural asset?
Sure. So the primary focus of the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund is for commercial businesses and particularly retail commercial businesses. So with that said, there are a number of businesses that on the service from the service level wouldn't qualify for the program, but that's where I would engage the applicant to think about what a potential commercial or retail component for the business would actually entail. So again, the focus of this is for commercial and retail businesses for the establishment of more vibrant commercial corridors on the Chicago South, Southwest, and West sides. So if you are a counseling business or you are a healthcare facility, or you fit into one of the other categories as Sophia mentioned, one of the things that you want to do on your application is to outline what, if applicable, commercial retail activity might happen out of the space, and just in general, how the rehabilitation of that space and the implementation of this business, if it's not already implemented, will benefit to the vibrancy and the positive economic impact of the community at large. So I'd really challenge you to think about that commercial component, if applicable, and what the outcome will be for the project commencing and happening at this particular location.
Thanks. Mary, anything else you'd like to add?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just one piece of advice for the applicants as far as eligibility. One thing that you can do is just look at our website. We have our finalists and awardees on the website. So you can see the different types of projects that we funded in the past, and that may give you, help give you some guidance for, this kind of question of commercial and cultural.
Great, thanks. Where should potential applicants look to find the list of organizations that can help them with their application?
That's going to be on
I can take that one.
Oh, go ahead.
So that's also on our website. So it is under, if you click on community partners, you'll see the list of all the organizations that can help with your application. I know some folks asked about getting, funds for the design work, hiring an architect before they're selected for the program. Unfortunately, we can't pay for that at that time, but we do have the community partners that offer services for free to folks. So you can call them for an appointment. But as far as hiring an architect or paying for some of those costs, we are not able to cover those before folks are selected into our program as a finalist, unfortunately.
Great.
And the same goes with, I think there was another question about acquiring a building and, taking on that risk. So, the property acquisition, that is, if you're applying, we aren't able to help you with any of those costs or fees. Unfortunately, that's at your own risk. And then if you are selected in the program, the property acquisition can be part of your project cost, but it cannot be the focus, and it will be a reimbursement. Like, we can't pay for those funds up front for you to buy a building. Unfortunately, they will be rolled into your project costs and paid out as a reimbursement. We also unfortunately cannot cover rent or someone's mortgage. Those cannot be covered by NOF funds.
Great, thank you. Can an applicant apply for NOF as well as other city grants?
Yes, you can combined NOF and specifically Small Business Improvement Fund funding for the same project for the same location. However, there is going to be a cap on that. If you are seeking both of those types of funds, as well as potentially other city grants, the cap for that would be $250,000. But the answer is yes, you can receive multiple grants for the same building. But we are going to ask that if you do have an active grant or are thinking about other grant programs, that you outline what those are in the application, so we'll have a better understanding of the source of funding for those, because that does impact what I had just mentioned about the $250,000 cap. So yeah, if you have something active on it or are thinking about it, just go ahead and mention that in the application.
Great. Let's see, what else do we have here? These questions are coming hard and fast, so thank you guys. We can see you're clearly engaged and asking questions as it is relevant for you. So this is great. What about applicants who have more than one business? Can they apply for multiple businesses or multiple locations?
Yes, you may apply for multiple businesses and multiple locations. The likelihood of both applications or all applications originating from one person or one group being selected is very low. Again, this is a competitive grant process, and we want to make sure that we distribute the funds to as many needy neighborhoods as possible. So yes, you may apply for multiple buildings, for multiple businesses, but again, the likelihood of selection for all of them would be relatively low.
Great, thanks. A question for both Mary and Ruben. There's been some questions about startups and site control. Do you have any advice for how someone who is maybe working on a startup business or does not already have a business or building, how they can strengthen their application and submit a competitive application, or possibly even an example from previous projects where it was a grantee that didn't have a building yet or didn't have their business set up yet, and how they were able to meet the requirements of the grant.
Sure. So I've looked at a lot of startup applications over the years, and we have admitted quite a few actually startup applications into it. What normally makes the startup applications stand out is if they're able to demonstrate site control. Of course, that's a primary one, as we've gone over, and that's for everybody. Site control is really a universal project readiness indicator that we look at for everybody. But for startups, that might be a little bit more of a challenge. So if you can prove that you have a letter of intent that's signed by both the property owner and the entity, that'd be great. Maybe even a real estate contract if you're purchasing it. But if you have a lease or a deed, that's great too. Financial feasibility, again, that's a universal indicator. But especially for startups, it would be nice to know that there is at least some financing available, or the applicant has a very efficient strategy in mind for attaining financing. But for startups specifically, what we have noticed among some of the stronger startup applications is that they're able to produce a business plan that is very detailed and has things like market analyses in there. Something that they produce that demonstrates that they've looked at the market for the area, the need of the area, where they're going to be in 5 years, and things like that. And then also strategic visions, if they have a plan of where they want to be as a company in 1 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. But yeah, that would be my insight for startup applications.
Awesome. Mary, anything that you'd like to add?
Ruben did a great job. I think for startups, my advice would be that for the NOF program, we're looking at, which projects can hit the ground running with their construction, the most quickly. So feasibility is really important. Is it a really solid business idea? Is the funding there to get the business up and running, to pay for the construction? Ruben talked about that, but you do need funding in the project. So are you talking to lenders? Are your finances, in good shape? So those are the things that we're looking for, because there is more risk with a startup. So, you want to show that you've thought through all those risks, and that you're ready to open the business and ready to start the project.
Great, thanks.
And please work with our community partners on that. They have a lot of resources for startups.
Awesome. Okay, so shifting a little bit to manufacturing and industrial. We saw in the presentation that manufacturing and industrial type businesses are not eligible for NOF. But what if the property is currently zoned manufacturing and industrial and you plan to rezone it? How does that affect the application in its review and selection?
So rezoning can be a very lengthy process, and it can include a lot of different departments and factors. So if you know that your building is not zoned properly for what you want to do, well, kudos to you, because that means that you've done research, and that's a great thing. The more research you do into a property, the more ready you'll be for the project. So that's a great thing to look into. But like I said, zoning can take quite a while. So as part of your application, it'll be apparent to the reviewers whether or not something is zoned properly. So what we potentially would be looking for is how you've thought about your strategy for getting it rezoned. Have you talked with aldermen? Have you spoken to the zoning board of appeals? Are you working with community partners on this? And if it includes acquisition, are you working with the actual seller of the property or a lender? We would basically like to see what the ecosystem is for getting it rezoned, the timeline for getting it rezoned, and then how that impacts the overall project timeline, both for the construction and for the implementation of the business. But yeah, so the more detail you can be on the actual strategy for getting it zoned and getting your business license issued as well, which is tied to it, the more context we have for that, the stronger the application will be. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, it is a great question. And this is Jim Harvin. I just want to, put a finer point on that, because you may have a project that may be sound and maybe a project that we may be very interested in once it kind of comes into our purview. And I understand we're about to do a round. It's going to happen September 14th. But keep in mind, we're not going anywhere. This program is going to open up another application in 2021. And you can be thinking that far ahead in order to get your project together. What I think you hear the team echoing on this call is that we're looking for the projects that have done a lot of that due diligence already. But this call is also to inform those who are not quite ready to get ready and to be ready for 2021, second round, first round, whatever round that is going to be comfortable for you and your business. So this is not about just making sure we compile as many projects in this round for 2020, and that's going to be it. I think thinking strategically, thinking long term will in the end produce better applications. Just want to make sure people heard that.
Yeah, thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, so we've gotten a couple of questions about how they can reach out to our community partners. So let me just flip back to the presentation real quick to the screen where we talk about this. This here is actually a screenshot of our website, which again is chicago.gov/NOF. If you look up at the top, there are certain tabs, one of which says applicant support. If you click on applicant support, the first section is about our community partners, and you will see we do provide a list of community partners that are available. There are other community organizations that are not on this list that could potentially help you with just business startup. So definitely feel free to reach out to those that are on this list, or if you're already working with another community organization in the area, you should just ask them if they are familiar with the NOF program, and if so, whether they can assist you with the with your application. Okay, let's see. Some other questions have come through. Jim, speaking about the grant program being offered yearly, is it the same time yearly, or if there are potential applicants that aren't going to be ready for this round, how do they best find out when the next round is coming?
Yeah, well, if history, is any indication, we don't have a set date for the open application periods, but we did one roughly about the beginning of the year, like about March, I believe it was, Sophia, for the first round, and you can see we're now in almost September to release the second round. So we don't have a steady cadence. We kind of make sure that we are teed up properly, that we're ready and have identified a timeline to make sure we can get the word out. We did have, literally grenades dropped on our plans for this year, giving, the number of, catastrophic events that have taken place. But, what you can, I think, put on your calendar is that there is going to be a first round and more than likely a second round for 2021.
Great. Jim, there's some questions about grant decisions and whether it's made on a rolling basis or for this round, if there's an anticipated decision date in terms of which projects are selected.
Yeah, we're targeting right about the end of the year to kind of just really, understand all of the applications and, go through our vetting and internal vetting process. We're hoping to have all that buttoned up, but again, it depends on the demand. I think, the latter round, we had over 1,000 inquiries, over 300 applications. So it's really going to depend on the demand in terms of kind of when we set that. But right now, internally, we're setting about the end of the year.
Great, thanks, Jim. Here's another question. For folks who maybe don't have a location yet in mind for their project, are there any recommendations for how they might find existing buildings or properties that would be eligible for NOF? For example, is there a list of available properties for NOF?
Yeah, I can take that one too, Ruben, if that's okay. The most efficient way to go about finding properties, particularly in a geography that makes sense for your business, and I need to make sure I emphasize that, it should make sense for your business. It shouldn't necessarily be, a list and you have to force yourself into some geography based on a list. But the most effective way and the most efficient way to go about it is to start working with a broker. Get involved with someone whose responsibility it is to find you exactly what you're looking for. And you can be specific in terms of looking at the geography for the NOF program, particularly some of the priority corridors that we have within Best, South, and West, and have them be specifically looking in those geographies to find a business that, again, or find a building that, again, fits your business. So, and by the way, you can have more than one broker that you can be working with in different geographies, based on, again, your business needs. I think that's the most effective way to go about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Jim. There's a good question here asking about building code violations. And before I pose it, just wanted to say that going back to this applicant support page on our website, for anyone who is interested in learning or looking to see if a potential property has building code violations, if you go under Project Readiness, we actually have a link to the City of Chicago Department of Buildings website where they have a database of known building code violations. So it's a good way to check out a property and just see, are there already any known issues that will need to be addressed or could be a challenge, not just with the NOF program, but with the successful completion of a project to begin with. But in this case, this is an interesting question. One of our attendees asked, can funds be used to rehab parts of a building that are not the code violations if there are code violations on the building? So I guess the question is, if they know that there's building code violations on the building, can they still apply? Are they still eligible for the grant? And if they take the funds and use it for the non-code violation portion of the project? That's a really interesting question. I'm thinking maybe Ruben, can you answer that?
Yes. So yes, that's a great question. So we evaluate building code violations on a case-by-case basis when it comes to the applications, because there's different types of violations. There's little violations with signage, or maybe with rubbish outside or something like that can be cleared up pretty quickly. Then there's other violations that produce a hazard to the public that are more serious. We'd have to look at the nature of the building code violation, and we'd have to look at the project that you're applying for, because in the case where it's a building code violation that's pretty major, it's normally associated with carpentry and mechanicals, and those are normally the things that people apply for the NOF. So it might be hard to make the distinction between a project that you're applying for and the building code violations that you're not wanting to address with the NOF grant. So we'd have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. We'd have to look at the violations, the nature of the violations, whether they produce a safety hazard to the public, and we'd have to look at the actual work itself to see if there's any potential overlap between the two. But again, I do want to emphasize that this is a competitive program. If there are major building code violations on a building, that makes it less competitive versus other buildings that do not have those violations, that could be an impediment to the NOF grant. So again, competition is key here. With those types of major building code violations, that is something that's taken into account throughout the review process. But again, we'd look at it based on the merit of the individual case.
Great. This is a really good question that came in. Is there a required credit score needed to apply?
Can I talk about that one, Sophia?
Yes, please.
Okay. We don't have a required credit score, but that is something good for applicants to look at when they're in the process of getting their project ready. So there is a portion of the project that you will have to cover. So the minimum is 25% of your total project cost. So if your project is $100,000, 25,000 of that project you will have to cover. Even if you get the full grant, we talked about the base grant and the bonuses. Even if you get the 100%, 25 of that is a reimbursement that you would get after the project is completed, once you show us that you've done the local hiring. So that $25,000, you would need to cover that. And now your project may be smaller than that, but we're just using that as a round number. So most people don't have $25,000 sitting in their bank account. So you most likely would need a loan. So credit score is a very good thing to look at, and your overall financial health. And to show that you've done that due diligence to see if you are able to get those funds for the project. You're talking to a lender, maybe you've been pre-approved for a loan. Those are all really positive things for your application to show that you can cover your portion of the project.
Awesome, great. And Mary, while you're still on, here's another question for you. This is a good one as well.
Yeah.
So with the project readiness quiz or the assessment, what would you recommend if someone did the multiple choice readiness assessment come September 14th, and the result is that they're not maybe quite there yet with their project planning, and they're able to get more ready, can they apply later in the same round?
Yes, great question. That's what the project readiness is for. So you go through it, let's say September 14th, you take it, and you see that there are some areas that you need to work on. We encourage you, the application, we have, it open for many weeks. So we encourage you to work on those things. If you're able to address some of those issues before the round closes, definitely come back. You could take it again. It won't be counted against you to take it again. Take it again. And if you've addressed some of those issues, you may get a different result and you would be able to go on to the full application. So you can take it again.
Great, thanks. Okay, so going back a little bit to acquisition, but this time from the lens of payout of grant. And Mary, Ruben, either one of you guys can take this. How should an applicant think about acquisition and maybe how they can use grant funds, or when they might be able to get grant funds to pay and help cover the cost of the acquisition?
I'm going to let Ruben take that one.
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. For the acquisition, we give credit for the acquisition after the rehab for the building has started and after the new construction has started. So if you acquire the building and you ask for a reimbursement, we actually wouldn't be able to give you that reimbursement right there, because again, the focus of NOF is for the rehab and construction of buildings on the eligible and priority and Southwest corridors. So we want to make sure that that rehab or the new construction actually gets started. So after you acquire the property, while you wouldn't see a grant for the property right there and then, we would give you credit for the acquisition throughout the life of the contract, throughout the life of the project. This could mean additional monies coming to you commensurate to what the total project costs are, or a lesser contribution you have to make into the escrow account. Ultimately, you're still investing the same amount at the end of the day with the acquisition, but it does impact how the project is paid for after that. So again, you don't receive money right after acquisition, but you do start receiving credit for the acquisition after the rehab or the new construction has started.
Great, thank you, Ruben. And then along the lines of that, here's another great question. The 25% minimum that is required to be covered by grantees, can this be demonstrated through personal funds already invested in the business?
Personal funds already invested in the business. If you're talking about a business banking account, yes. Personal funds invested in the business, I can interpret that a few ways, but if you are talking about funds that come from the business itself, then yes, you can use business revenue directly to finance your portion of the project. As long as we can make a clear connection between who the applicant is and who the business is, because the source of financing is important. That's why it's a good question. As long as we can make a clear connection between the source of financing and the applicant, then yes, you can use business finances to fund the project.
Great.
Sophia, can I jump in on that one?
Yep.
So the first part, personal finances. If you have funds available, like, sitting in your bank account, that's like a best case scenario. Definitely show us that you have those available for the project. If it's, let's say that you've already, you have a business and you've already purchased like inventory and equipment and you put your own money into the project. That's kind of a complicated question, but because the focus of the NOF projects is construction, you need that money to be available to pay for the construction project, not money that you've already put into the building or already put into the business. So it is a little bit complicated, but you need funds that are available to do the construction project. NOF, if you're selected, NOF will be paying for a portion of that, and you will be paying for a portion of it as well.
Great. Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. We've got just a few more minutes. So if you have a question that you have not seen us cover yet, definitely please use the Q&A and send it over. We've got a few more good ones I wanted to bring up. Here is one. Are there some businesses that are prioritized over others for the NOF program?
I could take that one. There isn't necessarily what I call a prioritization of certain types of businesses over others. The strength of the application really does boil down to how it stands out amongst the competition for the rest of the applications. So that's why we, throughout this presentation, we really wanted to emphasize the importance of project readiness, financial feasibility, planning, timelines, and just in general, making sure that the time that you're applying now is the best time for you to be applying, making sure that this makes business sense. The focus of the NOF grant program is commercial commercial businesses with a retail component to them. With that said, we do open the floor for a lot of different types of businesses, a lot of different types of applicants, including nonprofits. But we really do look at the strength of the application to make sure that the facets of it align with the NOF program. So again, it's about making your application as strong and as viable as possible, and making sure that you're demonstrating things like catalytic impact and feasibility of the actual project itself. I'll let you guys weigh in if there's anything else add to that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I would just say again, check out community plans, especially if your project is located in the Invest Southwest. If you, again, looking at the slide in front of you, if you go under Catalytic Impact, there are community plans that are available for you to review, and it is incredibly helpful for all applicants to take a look at that and be able to respond and speak to the community plans when they are presenting their application.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, geography matters. We are right now through our Invest South and West program, focused on 12 corridors across the city, both on the west and south sides of Chicago. And yes, we are paying attention to those applicants who have indicated that they're interested in either expanding or creating a business along one of those corridors.
Awesome, great. This is a really good question. This is about how the eligibility, or how projects that exceed the, say, the 500,000 or the 250,000 total project cost is considered for the small grant track. So if the costs for the total project exceeds 250, and they're using their own equity to supplement the grant funds, exceeding the 25%, do they have to apply for the large grant track? Or does it hurt their chances of getting a small grant if their project, say, is multi-million and they're not going through the large grant process?
I can answer that one, Sophia. So if the total project cost is more than $250,000, and let's say that they would be eligible for the 100%, absolutely, they are eligible for small and they do not need to apply for large. So we are, trying to have as much impact as we can, to use the dollars really strategically that we have. So if a project is larger and you have equity to bring to it, you have other partners, for us, that's a win, because that means that's more investment that we're bringing. That's going to stretch our 250 even further in the community. So we would encourage you to apply for NOF small.
Awesome, thanks. Okay, here's another one. Are there any banks working with the city to secure loans based on this grant program?
So I'm going to let Ruben answer that. I think as a city employee, I can't answer that question, but Ruben may have some resources that Summer Corps can provide.
Thank you, Mary. I do have a list of resources, like Mary said, that I can provide in terms of lending assistance. We also do have lending coaches available as a part of the technical assistance program that can help you out with different sorts of loans. It really comes down to what you're looking for. So what I would do is before, do your research. Are you looking for a bridge loan? Are you looking for a construction loan? Are you looking for a mortgage? Are you looking for a home equity line of credit? Definitely do your research. Different banks do different things. Different lenders do different things. For instance, Summer Corps, the company I work for, is actually a lender, but we only lend for acquisition and fixed equipment, and normally for very large projects. So my lending company wouldn't be best fit to lend for a rehab project. So with that said, I do have a list of lenders. If anybody is interested, I can send that list of lenders. They are lenders that have worked on NOF projects or small business improvement fund projects in the past. And again, we have lending coaches as a part of the technical assistance program that could also help you secure financing for the project.
So,
Sophia, if I could just add to that, I turned off my video. I got a tip from someone about bandwidth. I have had some internet issues, so apologies for that. Ruben mentioned the lending coaches, and those are on our website. Just a reminder, so once a project is selected for NOF and becomes a finalist, the lending coaches, architects, and construction managers, those costs can be covered by the grant. Before someone is selected, those costs are not covered. So if you did work with a lending coach as an applicant, you would have to cover those costs on your own. That is at your own risk, and that would be on your own. So just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Great. Thanks, Mary. And with that, we are out of time. So thank you, everyone. I want to pass the baton back to Jim. Jim, any final closing remarks to help us end the webinar today?
Yes, the first thing I want to do is thank everyone on the call today for participating. We just really enjoy hearing the questions and helping us to fine tune this great program. But I think if there was a theme that everyone should take away today is to ask and get help. We've got not only community partners who are involved in order to assist you with your application process, we also have this wonderful staff that just knows this program inside out and can also be of assistance. And then even once you guys have become finalists, the technical assistance program that we have here now is second to none. So get help. And again, just thank you guys for participating, and I look forward to each and every one of your applications.
Great. Okay, and with that said, we're going to go ahead and close this webinar. Thank you all again for joining us, and good luck.